is Melissa Milani, and I will be leading this webinar with you all for the next hour. And before we dive into our content, we are going to take just a couple of minutes to go through some housekeeping information. And I am going to apologize in advance for my voice. I'm battling some pretty significant allergies today, so thank you for bearing with me as I sound a little hypernasal. But my name is Melissa, and I am a speech-language pathologist. I serve the northeast part of Florida as the Saltillo consultant, and I am really excited to be here with you guys today. That we all have a really solid foundation before we get into the strategies, because you're going to see the merging of these techniques with these different strategies, and they are different. And if you don't know the techniques, then it's going to be a little bit hard to understand the strategies. And if you do know them but feel like a refresher is needed, then great. So here's what we're going to target today. We're really going to look at how to promote independent, successful communication, and we're really going to look at it in terms of a storybook framework. And the reason that we're going to do this is because this, as we know from research as an SLP, that shared storybook reading, dialogic storybook reading, is one of the most beneficial activities that we can do with our clients, that we can teach our caregivers, our families, to be able to do with their clients at home, to not only grow language, but to really foster and promote that independence and that proactive communication style. So we're going to review those 6 techniques from part 1. Again, if you took that, kind of give yourself a little quiz here and see if you can remember what they are. You might see a slight difference in the layout. And then we're going to get into the raw and the wrap strategies within a shared storybook reading context. And I'm going to model with you on the same type of storybook that I used in part 1, which is from tarheelreader.org. And I'm going to use the same low-tech 96 location board that you saw in part 1 as well. And we are going to talk about these 2 strategies, raw and wrap. Those are based on the early work of Dr. Jennifer Kent Walsh, who I mentioned in part 1 as well. She's one of my mentors and colleagues. And if you're looking for evidence, for a resource for these types of strategies, please go back and look at her early work. I will cite them for you as we go on as well. Okay, so one of the questions that people usually ask in the beginning is, why do we want to use storybooks for looking specifically at turn taking? And there's quite a few, and this is all evidence-based. And first off, storybooks are highly contextualized. So as SLPs, we know that most of the language that we use, whether it's in therapy or conversation, is decontextualized. It's not happening necessarily in the here and the now around these 4 walls that we find ourselves in. But we can use storybooks to make language very contextualized and yet still very robust. So it allows for that reciprocity of language learning and use across domains. So when we talk about language reciprocity, we're talking about speaking, listening, reading, and writing, or again, thinking in the larger domains, spoken and written. And we know that the more we are spoken to, the better speakers we will be. Or if we think of it in terms of aided language, the more that we are shown how to use our device, the better we will use our device. And it's the same thing with written language. The more that we are read to, the better readers we will be. One of the biggest tools we can do for our clients is to start to really open that door, or pave the way to open that door for literacy success. This is huge and something that we should be working on immediately as soon as possible. They're also very naturalistic. Most people enjoy listening to stories or having stories read to them. We can use them for a variety of things, including social learning, which is listed a little bit down below. It allows for scaffolding. So My clinicians, you know what this is, but for anyone that's not from a clinical field, this is really basically giving support to the person using the device to allow them to be successful, but that may not be able to be successful at a completely independent level just yet. So we provide some of those supports like asking questions or giving closed procedures, things like that, to make sure that we, again, promote that independence and support. And then it allows us to also really key in on early literacy predictors. So this is for our younger kids, but we know from research, especially the National Reading Panel was huge, this is an oldie but a goodie, that if our kids are showing difficulties with early phonemic awareness types of skills, we know that is a huge red flag for later literacy and academic struggles. So if we can naturally start to incorporate these storybooks into our intervention, then we can also kind of plug in to see if there's any types of red flags in those early literacy concerns. So these are the 6 techniques that we talked about in part 1 that I'm going to go through with you now. So again, if you were there in part 1, just see if you can kind of beat me to the punch in your mind, so to speak, so that you understand what I'm talking about. But these all work together. We separate them out in terms of different activities or behaviors, but they all work to focus on increased communication, which is the goal for all of our clients. So the first one is modeling or aided language modeling. And basically what this means is we as communication partners are using the client's device as well as speaking. So just because we are their spoken language partners and the device may not be ours, we are going to model using the device. This not only helps us from a clinical perspective, being able to learn where items and words are programmed and such, but we know that individuals learn language, whether it's aided or not, by being modeled to. So we use the device, we point to maybe 1 or 2 items on the board or on the device as we go. So keep in mind that modeling does not mean that we are pushing a button for every single word that we are speaking. So if I'm asking them a question, something like, what game would you like to play? I may model only 1 word in that particular sentence, and it might be what, it might be game. It does not have to be every single word. This is really important when we are teaching our family members or anyone that is coming from a non-clinical background how to provide modeling, because sometimes if we just say, oh, just model on the device and kind of dismiss it like that, like, oh, it's so simple and easy, it's really not. And then our caregivers think I have to be pushing a button for every single word that I'm saying, and it becomes too overwhelming, and then they actually don't do any modeling at all. Then the second one is pausing, or if you are a clinician, you may have heard this term, expectant delay. And this goes hand in hand with really setting the stage of turn taking, where someone speaks, then there's a pause, and then another conversational partner speaks. So when we call it expectant delay, because we're setting that expectation. So we might make a comment or ask a question, and then we pause, and we give a nice ample amount of time for our client to not only process what we have just said, but to formulate a response and then actually execute that response on their device. So kind of the very basic starting point for this is to count to 10 slowly in your head and kind of gauge the situation. See, is my client thinking, or are they just kind of passing the time? Obviously, we do have some clients that may say, oh, well, if I sit here long enough, she's just going to keep on moving. But as we start to really kind of flip our expectations. Like, that may have worked in the past, but now we're going to change this. We're really working on promoting this communication. This expectant delay is going to really allow the client time to go, okay, I have to get engaged here. And we do this with expectation, meaning we communicate to them non-verbally. We might raise our eyebrows, we might lean in, we might even kind of give some type of non-verbal cue, like, it's your turn. And so we want to make sure that we're giving them plenty of time to not only process, but then to also respond. This can be a challenging thing to do if you're new to it, or if you're trying to do this in a home environment. I get a lot of practice with my clients in the field, and as a mother of 3 myself, I totally understand how busy and chaotic life in your home can be. So it's not something that you have to do all of the time. You know, if you're in a busy meal time, then maybe pausing isn't the best thing to try right at that moment. But once you have a minute and you aren't surrounded in chaos like I am in my home sometimes, that's a chance to then implement that. The third technique is asking WH questions. And if you attended part 1, hopefully you're also thinking and answering WH questions. So I separate these out a little differently across the 2 workshops, as you'll see here, because of the approach to the different workshops. So asking WH questions, the reason that we really want to think about what questions are we asking is that WH questions promote that higher level language development. So we want to be thinking about, are we really moving our clients or our communication partners towards that growth mindset and giving them the opportunity to answer something that isn't already like a predetermined type of response, like a yes, no, or a 2-choice question. And this can be very, very simple. So instead of asking something like, do you want mac and cheese or chicken nuggets for lunch? We could just say, what would you like for lunch? So it's just taking that little bit of time to think, how can I reframe this question to ask it in a WH format? Now, some of you may be thinking, that's all fine and good, but my clients don't answer their questions just yet. Maybe the device is new, or they're totally happy in that passive role. So the follow-up to that is we answer the WH questions that we ask. We don't want to just leave questions hanging. Hold on, I'm getting some audio feedback. Let me see if I can mute. Okay, sorry about that. Again, technology, you never know what happens and who gets unmuted, and then we get to hear all the stuff happening. Okay, so where was I? Let me think. Okay, answering WH questions. When you ask a WH question, if your client doesn't answer it, we want to answer it on behalf of them. Think again about typical language development and about what we would do if we were working with a client that was learning language. We would maybe ask them a question like, where are we going today? Or what are we going to get when we go to the grocery store? They may not be able to answer it, but we would fill it in. So I always use the example with my son. When we would be getting in the car, I might say, we're going to go to Target today. What are we going to get? Well, I wasn't expecting him to answer, but I would fill in and say, well, we're going to get, paper towels and maybe some bleach, or who knows, whatever it was at that day that we needed, I'm going to answer it. So the point is, we're not leaving those questions hanging. We're really modeling the reciprocity of question and answer and conversation and back and forth. It also gives that extra language input that this is how we answer that type of question. So the next thing is prompting. Now, these are split apart. As again, I mentioned in the first part, we have prompts combined together. But because we're talking about storybooks and we're looking at it in a scaffolded model, I've separated them out for this webinar because we really want to think about what kind of prompts are we providing and make sure we're not accidentally giving more prompts than perhaps our client needs, because this can be something that, especially as clinicians, we can sometimes be guilty of doing. So a verbal prompt is going to be something like, show me on your device, use your device, show me to, something like that, where we're giving them a direct instruction. A physical prompt is, again, something that is going to be physical in nature. So it could be a gesture to the device, a point, it could be a tap on their arm or shoulder. And these verbal and physical prompts can be combined, but the whole point of prompts is to only provide them when absolutely necessary. If we have clients that don't need prompts, then we don't want to be providing them. This is going to change because, again, humans change. We're dynamic. Every day we're a little bit different than the way we were the last time they came in for a session. And as their language grows and we increase their zone of proximal development, you may have to bring prompts in and then remove them and then bring them back in as you work on another target and then remove them. So we really want to be aware of these prompts and not be using them just because, but only using them when they're necessary. And then technique 6 is responsivity. So this is really making sure that we are responding to our clients and not kind of taking control, so to speak. So for example, as parents, as clinicians, we get really familiar with what our clients like, what our children like, what they need, what motivates them. And so if they select something that's a little different than normal or different than what we think that they might want, sometimes we may go, oh, I don't think you really meant to hit that. I think you meant to hit this button that was right next to it. So that's what we're going to do because that's your favorite thing. When in reality, we should say, oh, really? You picked this book today. Okay, that's a new book. They're going to let us know if we respond in that way. If they're, no, that was an incorrect selection. That's not what I want. Give me another chance. So we want to make sure that we are really responding to their communication. If they're showing that they have more to say, that we wait and we keep giving them that opportunity. All of these things lead to increased communication. Now, when we get into taking those 6 techniques and putting them now into a strategic framework, and I use the word strategy and the word technique separately and independent of each other on purpose. When we think about a strategy is something that ultimately we want to be doing automatically when it's something that we know is going to benefit us. So you may have a strategy for test taking. You may have a strategy for making sure you accomplish certain tasks in your work week. And in the beginning, you approach it very precisely and cognitively, and you're very aware. But as you go and you start making those steps more habitual, then it becomes strategic, where you do something, it's just almost innate and it's allowing you for success. So we start with shared storybook reading, and over time, you're going to be able to adapt this strategy across communication activities, across contexts. So let me walk you through what this looks like. It's very simple, but it does have some moving parts to it. As I say in webinar 1, one of the things that is my ultimate goal for anyone attending this webinar, or when we get back to giving it in person, is to be able to have the information really lock solid, cemented in your mind, and not have to go back to your notes and such. Because if we have to constantly reference notes and PowerPoints and things like that, we're not actually committing it to memory. And then that makes it really hard to actually implement if we're kind of going, hold on, let me look at my notes. Okay, now I'm going to try it. Hold on, I have to look at the next step. So I'm going to say these things over and over and over again so that You really kind of walk out if you're going, I know what raw and I know what wrap are, and they're super simple. I can actually move forward with my clients. So if you look at the green arrow on the left going down, this is how the strategy works. So it's read, ask, answer. So we read in our storybook and we pair the modeling technique with the device, with the Nova Chat or the Touch Chat, whatever it is that you're using. And in the middle of the read and the ask, we pause. We have that waiting, that expectant delay. So we haven't asked a question, we haven't made a comment, all we've done is read. And then we stop and we wait. We look at our client, expectant delay. If they don't say anything, then we ask a question. What kind of question do we ask? A WH question. While we ask that WH question, we model again using our Nova Chat. And again, we wait. Because now we've actually asked a question. Sometimes, especially in the beginning of this process, if we're just doing the reading part, our clients are kind of like, yeah, keep reading, go on. But now we've asked a question. And so the expectation of a response has been put out there. And we pause. If our client does not answer our question, that's what we do. We then answer the question, again, modeling using the device. So we've walked through those first techniques in harmony, so to speak, and we're waiting. We pause after we answer. We wait to see what our client has done. If at any moment, yes, I see, Emily, that your question, live video of examples, this is actually coming up next on the next slide. If at any moment our client responds or initiates or comments, we stop what we're doing and we respond. So we jump straight to technique 6 and we respond to what they're actually communicating. But it's read, ask, answer, read, ask, answer. And if they actually interrupt us when we read, this is what we actually see in research. A lot of times as they start to learn this, by the time we get to the end of the study, we're reading the story and the client is interrupting the reading to make some comments or ask questions, which is exactly what we want, but we want to make sure we respond to that communication at any time. All right, so here's the video example that Emily was just asking for. So what I have done, just like in webinar 1, I've printed out a glossed storybook from Tar Heel Reader, which you can use tarheelreader.org to download. I mean, they've got oodles of different types of stories there, and then you can use our chat editor software to gloss them, which is what I did. So I put in symbols, so I've got aided language right there in our shared storybook. And then I'm also going to use a low-tech 96 location word power board to do the modeling. It shows up a little bit better on video. So I'm going to unhook my headphones and then I'm going to play the video for you to see this strategy in action. Okay, for this strategy, we are going to walk through the rah example with a storybook called A Day at the Beach. Now, this is from Tar Heel Reader, and I have also adapted it with some glossed symbols here, you'll notice. And we have our same 96 location low-tech board that we used in part 1. But remember, if you are using a Nova Chat or any other device, a Chat Fusion or Touch Chat, and you have a different board, this is just serving as an example. So you would use whatever board your client is using. Okay, so for our rah strategy, the way that Jennifer Kemp Walsh discusses it is that we include some of our 6 techniques that we learned in part 1 and reviewed just a moment ago, or all of them as necessary. And we put them into this 3-step process: read, ask, answer. So first, let's talk about it a minute with these examples, and then I'll go through and demonstrate.
So we would read what's on the text, a day at the beach. And then we would model using our device or our low-tech board. We would ask a question, whether it's a question that's on the text or a question that we are adding on as part of like a comment or a query. And we would, again, model with our board. And if we don't have a response given, then we would answer, again, either using the text or filling that answer in and also modeling. So let's run through what this would look like. A day at the beach. What day did we go to the beach? We went to the beach on Sunday. So I read, I asked, and I answered. And in between each of those, I had an expectant delay or a pause. Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, my pause is not as long as it really should be. If I needed to add in anything else, such as a verbal or physical prompt, then I would do that. Let's try another one. At the beach, there is sand and water. I love the beach. I'm pausing here, even though I didn't ask the question, I'm using one of my techniques where I'm using expectant delay and just waiting. Do you love the beach? Yes, you do love the beach. We always have a good time. So I asked, and then I paused, and then I answered. Now, at any moment, if our client responds, whether it's during the reading, during the asking of the question, or during our providing an answer, we respond and we go right back to the beginning. So even in the middle of reading, if I'm reading this, at the beach, there is sand and water. If my client starts using their board to say something, whether it's I love the beach or I like to play at the beach, something like that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to respond, oh, yes, I love to play at the beach too. I like to take a beach ball. I like to look at the seashells and show them. I'm not going to keep going through the process if they have initiated communication. So we go through read, ask, answer, always pausing in between the steps and always responding at any point when they initiate communication. And that's how we do rah, rah, rah.
Okay, so hopefully that helps you see it in action. I know we're all different learners. I'm going to address a couple of questions that came in the chat window real fast. So the first one was about finding the chat editor software. You can find that on our website at saltillo.com. You can go to downloads and you'll see chat editor. When you download it, it will not have a voice. Okay, so if you want to activate the voice on your chat editor software, you do have to hook up a NovaChat to the computer that you have the chat editor on. Chat editor is also only able to be downloaded to a Windows machine, or if you use a Mac, then you'd have to use a Windows virtual operating system. The other question that came in was from Emily, and she said, wouldn't you use the student's device? Yes, absolutely. If you have a student that's using a device. I said in the beginning of this that I was using a low-tech board to demonstrate because it shows a little bit better on video, but you could use the student's device. You could use your smart board with the chat editor software. You could use a low-tech board. It all depends on your situation. Another question that came in about the research that supports the RAW technique. Yes, the RAW and the RAP strategies are both the work of Jennifer Kent Walsh. So I linked it, or I'm sorry, I referenced it on the past slide. You'll see it on the next one as well. Let me go to it. Jennifer Kent Walsh, early 2000s. So definitely look that up. And I think that that was all of them. But if I missed it, please type it again. I'm trying to keep up with it as well as run the PowerPoint. Okay, so one of the things that I like to do, because when we learn, if we connect new learning to old learning, to stuff that we already know, it's really going to, again, kind of make it cement in your mind. So what has worked thus far for the client or clients that you have in mind for this different strategy that you're learning today? What's worked so far? What might be some challenges that you might face? Because as I said, learning this kind of in this sterile webinar environment is one thing, and then going and actually implementing it with a live human being, especially if you're in a group, there's going to be different challenges. So if we think about those possibilities and then think about what can we do to help avoid those challenges or circumvent them in the beginning, those are some things that we can do. Again, be proactive rather than saying, oh, well, I tried it and it didn't work because, you know, these other things, and so now I'm not sure I want to try it again. If we think about the challenges up front, we can really try and make sure that we modify our behavior or our approach to allow for those to be as minimal as possible. Then, okay, challenges have been doing remote. I 100% agree with you that that has been difficult for some people. One of the things I would recommend, if you've seen, you can put a virtual background on your whatever platform you're using, Zoom, GoToMeeting, Microsoft Teams, things like that. And a lot of people are actually putting a low-tech board as their virtual background, and then they're able to model. They can read the book. They may split screen it and have the book on one side and then model on the other just by having the virtual background, which is really, really helpful. Again, have your parents download the chat editor software for free. That's another thing that's really helpful because then you're both using the same type of boards there. Emily, yes, absolutely okay to use regular picture books, 100%. I'll get to that actually and make some suggestions about some different types of picture books that are really positive in this type of framework towards the end. And you're welcome. Yes, happy to help. I'm really glad that you guys are asking some questions. This is very helpful. A couple of the people that are on here as well have shared in past webinars about using PowerPoint and integrating that as well, which is another really helpful tool for virtual learning as well, and virtual therapy, teletherapy, whatever it is that you know we're calling it in your area. All right, so the next strategy is the wrap strategy. This is very, very similar to the first one. So again, and there's your citation up there up at the top, Kent Walsh, 2003. So it's the same read, ask, answer, but now if they don't do anything, we're going to prompt. So again, hopefully we don't have to use prompts, but if we do, then we want to make sure that we're only giving as much prompting that's absolutely required. I know I myself as a clinician can be extremely guilty of giving too much support. I get a little excited. I get, you know, all into the activity, and before I know it, I've given a verbal and a physical prompt when really they only needed a verbal, or I'm giving prompts when they don't need it at all. Maybe they just needed a little bit more time to kind of engage and finish formulating their response. But if we have to give a prompt, great, that's not a problem, that's not a bad thing. The type of prompt that you give is going to be dependent on your setting. That is one thing that you're going to want to look at. I know some settings, you know, don't want hand over hand or hand under hand. Some settings are totally fine with that. So you're going to have to kind of put this prompt into your own situation and think about what is it that you're able to do. Keep in mind that prompts are supposed to be very specific and short or small. When I teach this, especially to families or parents in the beginning, if I say, let's do a prompt, a lot of times the prompt is very lengthy. It's, okay, now it's your turn. You have to show me on your device. It's your turn. Show me. And that's a lot of language for them to actually have to process, when I really should say something like, show me on your Nova chat. Show me two. It's your turn. Something like that. That's very, very simple. Nikki, I see your question. What vocabulary board? I think you mean the board that I'm modeling on in the video. That's a 96 location board, and it is on our website under the download section. Okay, so again, though, at any time, if they start to initiate communication, we stop what we're doing and we respond. So let's take a look at this video in action. I'm going to unhook my headphones again and get it started.
So the second strategy that we call wrap is basically the same thing with an addition of prompt on the end. Now, I mentioned in the last demo with rah, that if at any time we need to do or provide a verbal and/or physical prompt, we can do that. However, this is a little different because it saves that prompt for the very end. When we are providing therapy services or trying to teach individuals how to become that more active, initiating communicator, we want to fade out our prompts in a systematic way so that it's not an all or nothing type of situation. And so in the beginning, they may need these prompts a little bit earlier in the sequence, or they may need more frequent prompts. But as they get the hang of this and they start to master not only use of the device, but communication and language skills, we can put in the prompt at the final portion of the strategy. So we have our same book here, A Day at the Beach, still glossed and adapted from Tar Heel Reader, and we will still use the base of the rah strategy, but we will add on a prompt. Again, pausing in between every step, and again, responding at any point if the client initiates communication, asks a question, makes a comment, whatever form that may be, at any step along the way. So if we were to read our book, and I'm going to skip down here, you can play in the sand with sand toys. I'm going to model with you, and then I might make a comment like, you went to the beach and it was a good day. I provide that expectant delay. I'm going to ask a question. Are you going to go again soon? I'm going to wait. And if they don't answer, then I'm going to provide an answer for them. Yes, I think you are. I think you might go this weekend. And since the whole point of this strategy is to really get our client to be responsive and then possibly initiating as we move on, if they still don't respond, I'm going to give a prompt, a verbal or a physical prompt, and it might even say, show something like this, like, when are you going to go to the beach? Your turn. Show me two. Show me go. Point to go. Something like that. We're going to be from general all the way to very specific. So it could be something like, show me on your board, or tell me on your device, use your Nova chat, or it could be something very specific, like use two, show me two, or even something more precise, like tell me go, because you're gonna go next weekend. So we go through this, and again, at any point when they respond, we go right back up to the top and we continue along, reading, asking, answering, and then prompting.
Okay, so hopefully that helps as well. And I see a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to address those. If we're teaching new vocabulary, navigation, motor plan, etc., would you start by giving more prompts initially and then decreasing? So the reason that we start with the raw strategy versus the wrap is because we only want to give prompts when necessary. Every client is going to be different. So you might have some kids that you do have to give more and then decrease. And then you might have some that just get it right off the bat. So I would say that it's really going to depend on your client and that situation. But when we think about language development and Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, that's really kind of the guiding force here, that we're not giving prompts when they don't need them, that we give them only to help them get to that point, and then we fade those prompts. Sheila asked, what counts as initiating? Again, that's going to be dependent on your client. I've had clients that are super excited and they try to initiate just by kind of opening their eyes really wide and kind of moving in their seat. And I know they want to say something. So I stop and I wait and I give them time to actually access their device. And then I have clients that dive right in and they just start talking right on their device, or they might touch me and then, make eye contact. So it's going to be dependent, but you know your client. And so if you know they're initiating, great, let's give them that opportunity to communicate. All right, so again, thinking about what's worked, what challenges as far as prompts, and then if there's anything else that you're thinking of as far as like, maybe there's a board that maybe is too simple for your client that's being used, a vocabulary that you think they maybe can actually step up to, then great, let's try that, especially if we're going to be allowed to give some prompts and give some supports. Maybe they can actually grow into a vocabulary that's a little bit more robust and allows for more language development. That's really what I want you guys to be thinking about with regards to this. Now, the other thing that we want to do, because I said we can start these with storybooks, but we also, as clinicians, are always thinking about generalization into other communication environments, into other communication functions and communication partners. So they may do really well with us in a shared storybook reading in therapy. But what happens when they go home? What happens when they're in the community? If I'm working with, an adolescent that maybe is in a supported employment program, what are they going to do there? How can we take these same types of concepts and help them bridge? And so while it starts with read, as we start to teach them these concepts over time, could we start to then say talk or converse instead of read? Absolutely. The whole goal is to get them to be initiating and participating in that turn taking. The research shows that individuals that use AAC are passive communicators, meaning they let their communication partners in whatever form, whether that's a teacher, a clinician, a parent, kind of drive the bus, so to speak, where they sit back and they will wait to be spoken to before they start speaking or start trying to communicate. And that's not what we want. We want them to be independent, really active communicators. And so bridging this same type of structure or framework into other environments is critical. Can we teach other people to do this? Maybe you are seeing this client in a teletherapy type of context right now, but could the parents or siblings even start to implement these same techniques and raw and wrap strategies at home? Absolutely. Let's start teaching these other partners so that they can help, again, kind of magnify the results of these types of strategies. So hopefully that helps you think of some things as well. Then we need to think about planning ahead, because there's going to be challenges. There's going to be things that we encounter at home that we don't see in a virtual therapy room. What goals are we working towards this year, as well as in the long term? As clinicians, it's our job to make sure that we're constantly thinking about the end, the ultimate outcome. We talk about this in terms of backward design, whereas parents, a lot of times, because that's their job as parents, is to be so focused on the immediate. Yes, they're thinking about the long term, but a lot of times their focus is right here and now. What are we doing this semester, this month, this school year? So as clinicians, we need to be thinking about future. What are we going to do as far as bridging this into, the next 5 years, into post-secondary education, into structured employment, things like that. One of the things that I'd like to talk about now in planning ahead is also these materials that you can use. So we use the storybook framework because it's very easy to begin with. When we think about storybooks, typically they're shorter. They have a lot of visual support, so the pictures are engaging, and they don't have as much text. So it allows for this very conducive environment to implement these new techniques and strategies to allow our clients to, again, we're kind of changing the show here on them, we're flipping the script, but we don't have to stick with storybooks. Could we then move to adolescent books, like, for example, The Magic Tree House? That's a series. Harry Potter, things like that, where now we're talking about lots of text and not very many images, but this may be more engaging for some of our clients that are at a higher level, or once they start to really master these processes, can we then make the materials a little bit more complex? Could we use things like expository texts, their textbooks from class, a newspaper, current event things? The election is giving quite a bit of materials in that regard. So yes, absolutely, we can move that way. But storybooks, since we're all kind of new to this and starting out, I'd like to give some suggestions. You saw me modeling from Tar Heel Reader, which is an amazing resource. Again, that's tarheelreader.org. It's out of the University of North Carolina, hence the Tar Heel notation there. But those are great, those are good, but a lot of times we need other things. My recommendation, and this is also based on the work of Dr. Kent Walsh, is that you find a series, because then when you're doing programming, thank you, Camber, for linking that. I can't type and speak at the same time. My brain doesn't like to do that. If you find a series, when you're programming the same characters once versus multiple books. This is usually one of the pieces of feedback that we get from clinicians and teachers, is that the programming aspect becomes cumbersome as far as a workload maintenance, and that's a completely real and valid concern. So for example, if we think about, I'm an oldie but a goodie, born and raised and lived through the 80s, so Clifford the Big Red Dog, the Berenstain Bears. One of my absolute favorites is Little Critter by Mercer Mayer. If you know those books, Dora the Explorer is another one, Diego, things like Pete the Cat, these types of books. There was an old lady, Stacy commented, yes, these types of books that not only are a series, so we've got the same characters and we've got tons of books to choose from, so we're not going to run out of materials, but they have great illustrations for conversation. They don't have a whole lot of text on the pages, and they're not lengthy, okay? So it's not like a Harry Potter situation where it's 1,000 pages and we're never going to get through it. Little Critter especially, once our clients, our kids really get involved in these techniques and strategies, most of the time you don't even start reading and they're accessing their device. They're starting to talk about like where the spider is hiding or what has little critter done because of the illustration. And that's what we want, is that engagement, that turn taking, that language, this communication. But I'm not having to program a new board or a new page every single time because I'm choosing a different book. Little critter, his mom, his dad, the spider, some core language, and we are good to go. So those would be some things that I would recommend as far as access goes for those types of storybooks. And again, you can move them along into things like the Magic Tree House, again, some other ones that might be very similar in terms of there's a series and there's the same characters and you can, go from there. Excellent. Marjorie gave a suggestion here. Piggy and Gerald, great books and lots of core vocab. This is wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So I'd like to open it up. We have a couple of minutes left. If you have any questions, please feel free to type it in the chat. A question that just came in is how to personalize a device for their commonly used words. So number one, I would definitely direct you to our YouTube channel. In fact, I'm going to advance the slide here for additional resources. Our YouTube channel has quite a few videos that show you how to edit and customize devices, how to import and export those customized vocabulary files. Maybe you do the customization on your chat editor software, and then you can transfer those directly to the device or to the Touch Chat app. Lots of different resources on there. And of course, your consultant can help as well. Myra, your question, will the video be available later? Yes, this is actually why you are not given a PowerPoint, because we post these webinars for later viewing on our YouTube and on our website. It's not for CE credit when you use it at that point later, but we do give it to you so that you can share it with parents, you can share it with coworkers so that they can actually learn and then start to implement as well. So I've called your attention to a couple of these resources, but our website, saltillo.com, I can't recommend that enough again, and that links to our social channels as well. On Saltillo, there's also quick reference guides for the devices as well as complete manuals. There's video tutorials, there's complete webinars, so you may need something that's super fast, like a 60-second video on how to edit a button to be able to send to a parent. That's there. And then there's things like this that are an hour or 2 hours online. There's implementation materials, downloadables for free, again, so that you can take and put into practice either virtually or in person. And then also, if you are on Facebook, I strongly encourage you to check out the NovaChat users group. This is a wonderful resource, not only for clinicians, but also for families. And you can even just be a fly on the wall, so to speak, and pick up all kinds of different ideas and techniques. So here's my contact information. If you have any questions about what we covered today, please don't hesitate to reach out to me through email or through phone. And then there's also our technical support information. You can live chat with tech support if you're not able to call in or email. You can do that straight from our website. And then, of course, we have insurance support to get these devices funded to help your clinicians that are maybe doing evaluations and not as much therapy. We've got aacfunding.com. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything at all. I haven't seen any other questions come in. Camber just posted the reminder about your CEU paperwork. Please don't forget to do that. Email that in to us so that we can get that sent out to ASHA within 15 days, but obviously the sooner the better. Thank you so much for joining us today. As you start to implement these in practice, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me or call me. I am happy to help whether you're in Northeast Florida or not. And thank you so much. Have a great rest of your Monday.